They handcuffed a black father in front of his children on his own vacation rental without asking a single question. The officers ignored his ID, mocked his FBI badge, and treated his family like criminals under the watching eyes of silent neighbors. But what they didn't know was that Marcus Reed wasn't just another target. He was a federal agent who knew exactly how to strike back. And the way this story ends, let's just say justice didn't need to shout because the whole country listened. It was the kind of afternoon Marcus Reed had been dreaming of for years. The sun was warm but not punishing, the breeze carried the smell of salt and grilled food, and for the first time in what felt like forever, his family was together, smiling, relaxed, whole. He stood at the patio grill in a white t-shirt and sandals, flipping burgers with one hand and holding a cold soda in the other. Across the yard, his wife Lauren was setting up a picnic blanket. Jordan, their 17-year-old son, was sprawled out on a towel with earbuds in, occasionally teasing his younger sister Kayla as she built sandcastles nearby. She was giggling, scooping up wet sand, her pink swimsuit now half covered in mud. Marcus exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been wound until that moment. 3 years without a proper vacation. Late nights, deadlines, and the mental weight of a career where stress was normal and danger was part of the job. But today was different. Today was peace. Then came the sirens. They weren't loud, no flashing lights, no dramatic screeching brakes, just 2 police SUVs pulling up quietly along the street, parking slightly askew, like they were in a hurry but didn't want to show it. 4 officers stepped out. No greetings, no smiles. Lauren was the first to notice. She stopped mid-step, holding a bottle of juice in one hand and the picnic basket in the other. Jordan sat up, pulling out one earbud, his eyes narrowing. Marcus instinctively turned the grill down. The lead officer approached briskly, his hand resting near his belt. "Step away from the grill, hands where we can see them." There was no preamble, no introduction, just command. Marcus blinked, unsure if he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "Now," the officer barked. "Hands up." Lauren dropped the juice. It splashed across the deck. Jordan stepped in front of Kayla, whose laughter had already faded. Marcus slowly raised his hands, keeping his voice calm, steady. "Officers, this is a private property. Is there a problem?" "We received a report," the second officer said, walking past the picnic table. "Suspicious individuals on the premises, trespassing, possibly armed." Marcus glanced at the table. Right there, in plain sight, sat the Airbnb welcome folder. Check-in code, emergency contact, house rules. He motioned gently with his chin. "That's our reservation. We rented this house. You're welcome to take a look." They didn't look. One of the officers moved fast, too fast, and grabbed Marcus by the wrist, twisting it behind his back and pushing him toward the patio wall. The spatula clattered to the floor. Jordan shouted, "Hey!" and was immediately grabbed by another officer, his arm yanked behind his back as if he were a threat. Kayla began to cry. The whole moment cracked like glass, silent, then splintering in every direction. Lauren, stunned, tried to speak, but no one listened. From across the street, a few neighbors watched. One woman held her phone, filming. Another man stood on his porch, arms crossed. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. The injustice wasn't in just the actions, it was in the silence. Marcus didn't resist. He didn't yell, but inside, something shifted. A deep, hollow ache settled in his chest, not for himself, but for the scene playing out in front of his children, for the humiliation, for the familiarity of it all. This wasn't new. What was new was how close it had come to something worse. He was a father, a protector, and in that moment, standing there against the wall in front of his family, surrounded by strangers who saw threat where there was none, he felt powerless. But not for long. This was not the end of the story, not even close. Lauren's voice cracked, not from fear, but from disbelief. "Please, this is a mistake. We're not doing anything wrong." Her words hung in the air, but none of the officers paused, not even for a second. Jordan struggled as one of the officers shoved him face first into the sand. His forearm was twisted behind his back, his knees scraped against the concrete edge of the patio. His lips were tight, holding in what he wanted to scream. His whole life, he'd been taught to stay calm, stay respectful, follow instructions. But this felt like punishment for simply existing. And worse, it was happening in front of his baby sister. Kayla was clinging to her mom's waist now, sobbing quietly, her cheeks stained with tears and bits of sand. She didn't understand what was happening, only that her brother was being hurt and her dad was being treated like a criminal. And Marcus? Marcus said nothing. He stood still, body pressed against the stucco wall, feeling the heat of the sun on his back and the cold metal of the handcuffs around his wrists. He kept his breathing even. He kept his gaze soft. He didn't move. Because he knew. He knew how fast things could go wrong. He knew what could happen when a single word was misinterpreted, when a twitch was mistaken for resistance. He also knew he wasn't the man they thought he was. The badge tucked behind his license in his wallet wasn't for show. It was real. It had been earned over 15 years of undercover work, in cartel circles, arms trafficking rings, human smuggling networks. He had worn wiretaps in nightclubs, tracked fugitives through back alleys in foreign cities, and been in more federal briefings than any of these officers could count. And yet here he was, pinned, searched, ignored. He watched, expressionless, as one officer pulled his wallet from his shorts pocket, flipped it open carelessly, and paused. There it was, shining beneath the plastic, his credentials. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Marcus Reed. But the officer barely glanced at it. A smirk curled on his lips as he tossed the wallet back on the table. "Fake badge," he muttered to his partner. Marcus's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned his focus inward, observing, memorizing, gathering every detail, the tone of voice, the body language, the badge numbers, the behavior. He was building a case without lifting a finger. It was instinct, it was training, it was survival. A third cruiser rolled up, back up. One of the new officers walked over, scanning the situation. Marcus, still restrained, asked calmly, "Can I speak to your supervisor, please?" The officer raised an eyebrow, then chuckled. "You people are always playing the victim." Those words landed like a slap. Lauren flinched. Her hands, trembling, reached for her husband's arm, as if she could protect him by simply touching him. Then she snapped. "Do you even know who my husband is?" she shouted, the restraint in her voice finally breaking. "You have no idea what you're doing." The officers barely looked her way. But Marcus turned. Despite the cuffs, despite the ache swelling in his chest, he gently placed a hand over Lauren's. His voice was low, calm. "Not yet," he whispered. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in the officers, but in Marcus. Because now, it wasn't just about getting through the moment. It was about what would come next. What they had just done would not stay here on this patio, buried in sand and silence. It would echo. And they would hear it. All of them. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, not calm. Just quiet. The kind of silence that follows a storm. Not because the storm is over, but because everyone is waiting to see what's left standing. Marcus sat at the edge of the couch, his elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked on the glowing screen of his laptop. His hands moved with precision, typing, uploading, attaching, encrypting. Every keystroke was exact, intentional, cold, but righteous. Behind him, the family was still recovering. Jordan sat on the floor with an ice pack wrapped around his wrist. His football hoodie was tossed aside, and his usual confidence had faded into quiet anger. He didn't speak. Kayla had refused to go to bed unless her parents were in the same room. Now, curled up in Lauren's lap, she clutched her stuffed animal so tightly it seemed stretched. Lauren hadn't changed out of her sundress. She hadn't touched her dinner. Her eyes were on the wall, unmoving. Marcus didn't speak to them just yet. There would be time for that. Right now, he had work to do. He wasn't angry, not anymore. That emotion had come and gone, replaced by something sharper, focused, exacting. Cold, but righteous. He logged in to the secure FBI portal. He didn't file a local complaint. He filed an internal misconduct escalation, straight to the Office of Professional Responsibility, the same office that oversees corruption, use of force reviews, and departmental violations across the nation. He uploaded a preliminary summary of the incident, tagged 4 officers, included body descriptions, badge numbers, timestamps, and even referenced a potential misuse of authority statute. He included the fact that his credentials had been seen and discarded. He hit send. Then he picked up his phone. First call, the Director of Internal Affairs, a man Marcus had briefed with years ago during a cross-agency trafficking operation. Not a friend, but a man who listened when Marcus spoke. The line rang twice. Then, Agent Reed? No introductions, no small talk. Just, what happened? By the time the call ended, a silent chain of action had begun. Washington was awake. Second call, Elijah Barnes, college roommate, now a senior correspondent at a national news network. He owed Marcus a favor, a big one, and Elijah was always looking for stories that meant something. Marcus didn't need to ask twice. He only had to say, "Body cams, 4 officers, my family. I want the truth seen." Elijah responded with 2 words, "I'm on it." That night, while Clearwater slept, subpoenas were issued. The body cam footage, originally logged and stored, was pulled, duplicated, and sent to federal review. 3 civilian witnesses who had been standing nearby, neighbors, were contacted. All 3 agreed to submit statements. One had already posted a shaky vertical video on social media. It had started to spread. By 9 a.m., the Clearwater Police Department received a direct call from the Justice Department. No warning, no request. Just a notice of federal review and an immediate freeze on all relevant personnel pending investigation. Inside the department, panic set in like a wave. Phones rang, doors closed, statements were pulled. Officers were ushered into quiet rooms. What had started as just another routine stop had now become something else entirely. A national case, a federal spotlight, a reckoning. At 10:42 a.m., the footage hit the news. There was no editing, no music, no narration, just raw body cam clips. A man calmly offering identification, a badge, dismissed. A teenager shoved into sand, a child crying. A family made small for no reason at all. The nation watched. And in that moment, Marcus wasn't just a man on vacation. He was the mirror no one wanted to look into. And the system, caught in its own reflection, could no longer pretend not to see. By the end of the week, the silence was gone. It had been replaced by headlines, by questions, by consequence. 3 officers, suspended. One, quietly, submitted his resignation and vanished from public view. The department scrambled to contain the fallout. And standing in front of the press that Friday morning, the police chief, flanked by lawyers and community leaders, read from a statement that had been rewritten a dozen times. "I offer a sincere apology to the Reed family. The incident does not reflect the values of our department." The words echoed beneath the buzz of drones and camera shutters. Behind the crowd, protest signs bobbed in the air. Some read, "This time, we saw everything." Others simply held a still frame from the body cam. Marcus's badge, glinting in the sun, left on the table and ignored. But Marcus didn't attend that press conference. He had chosen a different stage. That afternoon, he stood back where it all began, the edge of the beach. Only this time, he wasn't wearing sandals and a t-shirt. He wore a dark suit, crisp, formal, precise. Lauren stood beside him, hand on his arm. Kayla clung quietly to his side, her little fingers locked in his. Jordan stood just behind, taller than before, wearing his varsity jacket proudly. A row of microphones pointed toward him. The world waited. And Marcus Reed spoke, not with anger, but with purpose. "We weren't just disrespected," he said, his voice steady. "We were profiled, endangered, publicly humiliated. And the only reason I'm standing here, not forgotten in a headline, is because I had a badge in my pocket." He paused. "What happens to the families who don't?" There was no applause, no cheering, just silence. Because the truth didn't need decoration. His words aired across every major network that night. Clips circulated online. His name trended, not as a victim, not even as a hero, but as something deeper. A voice of clarity in a country struggling to listen. Within weeks, pressure mounted on lawmakers. Town halls filled with residents demanding change. And 1 month later, the state of Florida passed legislation mandating independent third-party review boards for all police misconduct cases involving racial profiling. It was the first of many steps. And when Marcus was offered a promotion within the Bureau, a larger office, a bigger team, higher clearance, he turned it down. Instead, he accepted an appointment to the National Civil Rights Task Force, where he would investigate systemic abuse, support legislative reform, and train law enforcement in accountability practices nationwide. But this story wasn't just about institutions or policies. It was about people. Because even as the headlines faded and the protests moved elsewhere, a little girl named Kayla began sleeping with the lights off again, no longer afraid. A young man named Jordan walked onto the football field with his chin high, his scholarship jacket zipped up to the collar, not ashamed, but proud. And a man named Marcus Reed proved that justice doesn't always need to raise its voice. Sometimes it only needs to speak when it matters most. Because this time, when the system tried to humiliate him, it humiliated itself instead. And the country watched. And for once, it listened.